Violence in Schools, a Conflict Theory Perspective. Hello everyone, my presentation today will focus on violence in schools, specifically through the perspective of conflict theory. I will explore the major causes, patterns, and consequences of school violence, and I'll connect these to broader social inequalities. I'll also integrate empirical research from the past 10 years to support my analysis. Introduction. Definition. Behaviors that harm students physically or psychologically. Examples include bullying, fights, and school shootings. The importance is that it affects student learning, mental health, and safety. School violence includes behaviors that harm students physically or psychologically. This can range from bullying and fights to extreme cases like school shootings. Understanding school violence is important because it impacts students' learning, mental health, and overall school safety. Types of school violence. The first type is physical, which includes fights and assaults. The second is verbal and psychological, which includes bullying and threats. The third type is sexual harassment, and the fourth is cyberbullying. School violence is not limited to just physical harm. Psychological abuse, bullying, sexual harassment, and cyberbullying are also forms of violence. Each type can create a hostile school environment and negatively affect students' social and emotional development. Conflict theory lens. A society are groups of people in competition for resources. Another example is power imbalances between students, teachers, and administrators. Violence reflects inequality and marginalization. Conflict theory suggests that society is composed of groups competing for limited resources, power, and status. In schools, violence can be seen as a reflection of inequality, such as differences in socioeconomic status, race, or authority. Those with less power may act out due to frustration or marginalization. Causes of school violence. Socioeconomic inequality and poverty, family environment, peer pressure and gang involvement, media influence, and lack of school resources. Family environment includes neglect and abuse, media influence includes violent content, and then lack of school resources include counselors and security. Several factors contribute to school violence. Poverty and inequality can create frustration, while family neglect or abuse can model violent behavior. Peer pressure and gang involvement are significant, as are violent media influences. Schools lacking resources like counselors or safety measures may struggle to prevent violence. Sociological concepts. Socialization, role conflict, deviance, and resource mobilization theory. Socialization is family and peer influence behavior. Role conflict includes students versus authority. Deviance includes breaking school norms. And then the resource mobilization theory includes community and student activism. Sociological concepts help us understand school violence. Socialization influences behavior, which is an example where students may model aggression seen at home or in media. Role conflict occurs when students resist authority or feel powerless. Deviance is any behavior breaking school norms, and resource mobilization theory explains how students or communities organize to reduce violence overall. Statistics. 61% of public schools reported at least one physical fight without a weapon in 2021 to 22. 19% of U.S. students grades 6 to 12 were reported for being bullied on school property in 2021 to 22. 22% of female students versus 17% of male students were reported being bullied in 2021 to 22. 26% of middle school students versus 16% of high school students were reported for being bullied in 2021 to 22. Statistics show that while violence is a widespread issue, research also indicates that many students were reported for being bullied or physically threatened at school. White school shootings are rare, but they have high impact effects on communities. Case study. An example is the Parkland school shooting. The causes of this shooting were social isolation, access to weapons, and mental health gaps. The consequences included trauma for students, staff, and community. To illustrate this, consider the Parkland school shooting. The violence was linked to social isolation, access to weapons, and inadequate mental health support. The consequences were devastating for students, staff, and the wider community. Effects of school violence. Effects of school violence include physical injuries, emotional trauma, including anxiety and depression, and poor academic performance overall. School violence has serious consequences. Students may experience injuries, emotional trauma, depression, and anxiety. Academic performance often declines, and absenteeism increases, which can create a cycle of disadvantage, especially for marginalized students. Solutions and interventions. Some of these include anti-bullying programs, counseling and mental health support, conflict resolution education, and parental and community involvement. Preventing school violence requires multiple approaches. Anti-bullying programs and conflict resolution education reduce incidents. Schools need more counselors overall and mental health support. Parental and community involvement is essential, and policy changes at the school or district level can create safer environments overall. Sociological analysis. Conflict theory. Conflict theory says that violence reflects power struggles. Students from marginalized groups may face more challenges. Another example is structural solutions, like school resources, plus individual interventions that are needed too. From a conflict theory perspective, school violence reflects broader social inequalities. Students from marginalized backgrounds may face more challenges and resort to violence as a response. By addressing violence, it requires both structural changes in schools and more support overall for students individually. Conclusion. Overall, violence in schools is complex and it is multi-faced. Sociological theories explain causes and patterns. Prevention requires systematic approaches and support. Overall, the goal is to create a safer and more inclusive school environment. Conflict theory emphasizes redistributing power and resources. By redistributing these power and resources, more minds are able to come together to think of better solutions for these problems. When these problems are often ignored, they build up and lead to more destructive effects, which affect everyone's mental health, most importantly, the students that are being involved. To reduce school violence, we need different solutions, but the most important solutions are equitable funding, increased mental health support, reduced bias in discipline systems, and student participation in decision-making. Students know what they need the most, and when they have more of a decision and a say in the school, they're able to come together and think of better things, more importantly than the staff who don't understand. When power is shared, conflict decreases. References. Before I wrap up my presentation, I want to show the peer-reviewed sources that supported my research. All of these articles were published within the last 10 years and provided important findings on school violence, inequality, and well-being. The first study helped me explain how structural inequalities in schools, like funding gaps and segregation, can increase the risk of violence. The research showed that high schools with fewer resources had significantly higher rates of student conflict. The second article that I want to touch on is actually the second one, which focused specifically on funding inequity, and how it affects student behavior. Their work supported the point I made about how under-resourced schools often experience more disciplinary problems and more incidents of aggression. Those were the two that I thought helped me the most and gave me the most information, as well as giving me the strongest evidence to support what I was saying. Thank you.